Hello from Venice. We're here for the oldest and largest cultural exhibition in the world, the Venice Biennale. This breathtaking floating city hosts the Olympics of the art world every 2 years. The original Biennale, on which others in the world have been modelled. The 60th edition runs from April until November. In that time, it will welcome around 800,000 visitors. Today in Arts 24, we'll bring you some of the highlights from the Venice Biennale. It consists of a central exhibition spread across 2 enormous spaces and 19 national pavilions. The main exhibition, called Foreigners Everywhere, is curated by the director of Sao Paulo's Musée d'Arte, Adriana Pedrosa. It will show a record 332 artists and collectives.
I have 4 subjects of interest, from the subject of the foreigner and the immigrant and the diasporic and the exiled and the refugee and the expatriate. I unfold into the queer, because the queer is, of course, the stranger and the strange. And then the 3rd subject is the outsider artist, the artist operating outside traditional, modern and contemporary circuits. And the 4th subject is the subject of the indigenous. So indigenous artists have a very strong presence in the exhibition, because the indigenous artist is often treated as a foreigner in his or her own land.
This central theme, Foreigners Everywhere, originates from a series of works by the Palermo-based collective Clairefontaine.
Being a foreigner is a relational experience. A person that is a foreigner in one place is not a foreigner in another, and we can all be foreigners when moved from our own context. So it is a real challenge to imagine what would it be to understand how we can be foreigners everywhere without it being a tragic experience.
This year's Venice Biennale has taken steps to spotlight underrepresented voices, with particular emphasis on celebrating indigenous artists from places like Peru, New Zealand, Brazil, and the United States.
So this is the first gallery of the exhibition, the space in which to place me.
Queer Choctaw Cherokee artist Jeffrey Gibson is the first ever Indigenous artist to represent the United States at the Venice Biennale.
These 2 I knew were the first 2 things I wanted people to encounter. I refer to them as ancestral spirit figures, and they refer to the regalia of Native people.
The artist's work grapples with notions of identity, belonging, and national pride.
You know, things like singing, drumming, regalia, our ceremonies have been considered contraband in the past and have been confiscated. And so when I talk about this 20th century, it's really a century of reclamation, of bringing these back. And then the text, I really wanted to speak about the founding documents, was the starting point, but ultimately that leads into amendments. So we have the Reconstruction Acts here in the 1800s. This text, "We Want to Be Free," is my writing. "We Are Made by History" in the back is from Martin Luther King Jr.
In Native American history, there's much trauma. Genocide, stolen land, and broken treaties. But for Jeffrey, there are other aspects that need highlighting, like spirituality, celebration, creativity, and resilience.
Many people are familiar with the traumatic history of Native people, and I think I have had the opportunity of working in museum collections and seeing beautiful, beautiful objects, like handcrafted, that it's like, when you're under such duress, why would you take the time to make something so beautiful? And now what I realize is that those objects of beauty are really microcosms of freedom and of hope and of future and of innovation. And I think that that's how I envisioned thinking about this, almost like against all odds. You know, that's the root of it. But ultimately, it is meant to show strength and continuation and empowerment.
Describe what it means to you to be the first Indigenous artist to represent America at the Venice Biennale.
Probably in my early 20s, I was aware of the Venice Biennale, and it just sort of clicked in my head as like, this is something that I'm going to do. I've had moments in between then where I've been like, I can't do this. I've taught, parenting, considered going back to school for many things, and I always returned back to art making. And I think over those years, I have really worked very hard to figure out how to bring these histories and these languages into a visual form. Many Native people will tell you this, but I don't think any of us feel that the right thing to do is to move as an individual. So to try to bring attention to other people and to physically bring people here has been a part of the project since the beginning. So that feels really incredible. I feel proud of what we've done.
Let me know. Let's get into the latest from nation to nation. This is Sisters.
Do you think the world is changing, the art world is changing and becoming more open to Indigenous voices and other voices?
I do. I mean, I think it's also a generational thing, I'm 52 now, and I remember in my 30s speaking to a curator who said, you're gonna realize that everyone who grew up in your generation is also becoming curators, they're becoming writers and directors, and there will be a time when it will be, this is what we need to do. And so it feels like that's what's happening right now, and I hope it continues to grow.
In your more than half a century on the planet, how have you seen the fortunes of Native Americans change?
That's a complicated question because I think I still am very much tethered, to a home community in Mississippi and Oklahoma, where many of my family members still struggle with many of the things that people are familiar with. Also, my tribe funded my education in the 90s when I went to the Royal College of Art in London, and that was unheard of at the time. So I think this feels like a fulfillment of that promise. So when I say it's complicated, it's because there are those of us for whom we've had stability. I have both my parents who worked very hard. I also moved around quite a bit, so I've had a lot of exposure to other cultures. And I think being able to see an American experience, a Native American experience internally and also from the outside has given me kind of like a spectrum. But I wouldn't say that that's necessarily true for everybody.
Can I ask you then about your feelings about the upcoming elections in America?
Yeah, I mean, I'm nervous. I've never seen us at a moment where we were so divided. I will say what we've done here during this week has brought me a tremendous amount of hope. And I also truly do believe that there are many, many, many more people who are in favor of forging forward together. So it's almost like who's louder at this moment,
At the Venice Biennale, Africa aims to buck the trend after years of underrepresentation. Benin, Senegal, Tanzania and Ethiopia all have pavilions here for the very first time.
One of the paintings is No Country for Young Men. This is more or less about migration.
A geographical and spiritual journey from Addis Ababa to Venice's Palazzo Bolani.
I try to raise, so many questions, as often as possible while I'm working. Like, is it the same to be a foreigner for everybody? Is it the same, for example, for a European to be a foreigner in Africa and an African to be a foreigner in Europe?
Questions of identity, racism and migration are not just at the heart of Ethiopia's first ever pavilion.
The exhibition is called Bok, which means link. We're all different, but we're all linked by something. We have links.
17 canvases linked to form an impressive fresco, depicting the reverse of Darwinism, the regression of man to monkey. Senegalese artist Alioune Diane's puzzle is an ode to some of the challenges facing contemporary society.
I consider myself to be an activist, as the majority of the themes behind my pieces are to do with problems in the world, such as racism, exploitation of natural resources in Africa, and specifically Senegal, as well as illegal immigration.
The horrors of the slave trade, the deep roots of voodoo, as well as African feminism, link the four artists at Benin's inaugural pavilion.
My installation is an answer to the question of the fragile state of women's rights. I think that if we had more communities like there used to be in the past, to help protect, to educate, support and raise women up, we'd have fewer problems coexisting in this world.
Past, present and future on display. From Ashola Akpo's reimagining of old photographs to Chloe Kenham's glass reproductions of instruments stored at Paris's Quai Branly Museum. In 2021, France gave back to Benin 26 looted colonial-era artifacts stored at that very museum.
We find a way to take a side road to restitution, to think about what we can learn from those objects, what we can learn from the way we lived with art 200 years ago.
A soft power play bringing the African nation's cultural heritage to the international stage.
I've brought Beninese culture to the Biennale so that people realise that we need to stay open-minded and that there are foreigners everywhere, and I am one of them.
12 of Africa's 54 countries are at the Biennale, a historical chance to change the narrative and for greater visibility in a post-colonial world.
That's it from us in Venice. We'll leave you with artwork from Julien Crozet. He's the first Caribbean artist to represent France at the Venice Biennale. Thanks for watching. See you next time.